What's going on, everybody? The networking guru here, and we're going to do 100 network plus practice exam questions. This is going to be all from domain 1. This is going to be a 5-part video series. We're going to have probably 80 to 100 questions for each domain. Domain 2 is a little smaller, and hopefully we get to 500 questions, have this out within a week or so. Let's go ahead and get started. So if you want to skip, I'm going to edit in there where the time mark is to where the questions are to go ahead and get started. If you don't want to listen to this little advertisement I have going over our learning management system. So if you want access to all these questions and the software I'm going to use, you can purchase our course. You can purchase our Network Plus N10-009 course where you get access to all these questions, more questions. I don't put everything in these YouTube videos, bonus content, flashcards, and access to my personal or the Trepa Technologies network where you'll be in our Discord working with other IT professionals, talking to other IT professionals. Sometimes we do set little meetings with our students if they need it, 15-minute meetings on like our Scheduly link where we teach them, okay, here's how you kind of brand yourself. Here's what you want to do on LinkedIn. Here's what you want to do to make yourself stand out from competition when you send that resume in, right? So if you want access to our course, to our professional network, click the link in the description below. And now let's go ahead and do our quiz. So I'm here at our Network Plus course. I'm going to scroll down here where our quiz is here. I'm going to go to these domain 1 questions. There's 100 questions here. Let me zoom in. And what we're going to do for these questions is I am going to, let me make sure my face is in a good spot. What I'm going to do is read the question. We're going to answer it. We're going to read the explanation, and for some of these, I may bring up a whiteboard just to explain as well. So we're going to have that sometimes. I don't want to make this video like 5 hours long, so let's just go ahead and get right to it. So question 1, which of the following best describes the purpose of direct attached copper cables? So we're going to go with C. DAC, right? Direct attached copper cables. This is going to be to connect network devices over short distances within data centers. So these are going to be like high-speed cables, okay? So DAC, direct attached copper, they're high-speed cables used to connect network devices over short distances, typically within the data center. You can see we can get up to 40 gigs. Another cable that can be used for this is like twin-ax cable as well. But it's short. It's short. Think of it like almost in a stack. If you have a data center rack, and you have like your storage area network on the bottom, maybe like a Cisco Nexus switch, and then a compute chassis. I use Cisco UCS. You could have like twin ax or DAC cables between there for that high throughput, right? Up to like 10 gigabits per second, right? Question 2. Which of the following ports is used by FTP for data transfer? So this is a good question because FTP actually uses 2 ports. One, it has the control port. That control port is going to be like when I open up FileZilla and I connect, or I open up SFTP application, I connect to a server, and I get a GUI where I can see the file folder structure on the right of the remote device, and on the left of my screen, I can see my local file folder structure. That's done with the control. That's how we like interact with the server. But then when we actually transfer that data, that's going to be done over the data port. So, the data port is going to be port 20. The control port is going to be port 21. Port 22 is SSH, and port 23 is Telnet. So, that is going to be a final answer, port 20. Pause the video if you'd like to read that explanation. Question 3. What is a key difference between network security groups and network security lists in a VPC? So, here we're talking about networking in the cloud. So a VPC, virtual private connect or cloud, is really just a subnet. What we call that in Azure is a VNet. It's a way to just do network segmentation for the resources in the cloud. So if I have a couple VMs in the West region and the East region, I may make a VPC in the West and East region, and a VPC is also in itself a cloud resource, but then I place those resources as a part of that VPC, and then we may be able to get some advanced networking features like some VPC peering or VNet peering between them. And then we can place access rules, right? So a network security group, a network security list on that VPC or on that VNet, and then all the resources by default will get those rules, right? So that's kind of a way we might want to organize within our cloud. But to the actual question here, difference between a network security group and a network security list. So that is going to be B. NSGs provide stateful filtering, while NSLs provide stateless filtering. Let's use the explanation here. Network security groups provide stateful filtering, meaning that if an inbound traffic request is allowed, the corresponding outbound response is automatically allowed. Or network security lists, on the other hand, provide stateless filtering, requiring explicit rules for both inbound and outbound traffic. Question 4. Which fiber optic connector type uses a small form factor push-pull design and is commonly used in data centers for high-density connections? That is going to be, I believe, LC. So that's going to be the LC connector type, okay? So the explanation here, there's so many different connector types when dealing with fiber. That's why it's good to just go over these, right? What are the differences? So LC, the local connector, is a small form factor fiber optic connector designed for high-density connections. Question 5. Which of the following is a key function of a VPN, a virtual private network? So VPNs, when it comes to enterprise networking, connect remote sites or connect that remote user to the enterprise. So let's see here. And again, it does have encryption as well. So we'll go with this. This is one of the functions, right? Encrypting data to ensure it remains confidential while transmitted over public networks. So our VPN configurations can have things like IPSec or TLS riding that VPN, or that is what the VPN is, right? Like HTTPS, to actually protect our data in transit using encryption, maintaining the confidentiality. Question 6. What type of DNS record is used to point a domain to an IP address? So that's going to be an A record. So DNS, what does it do? It resolves host names to IP. So when I build a DNS server, and like let's say I go buy a domain, so I go buy trepatech.com, and then I host my own DNS server, my A record will be trepatech.com to whatever my public IP is of the server that's hosting my website, right? And that I'm attaching that domain to. So that's going to be an A record, okay? Question 7. Which type of cable is specifically designed for use in air handling spaces to comply with fire codes and reduce the risk of smoke inhalation in the event of a fire? So that's going to be a plenum cable, okay? That's going to be kind of like the jacket, right? On the outside of that Cat 5, Cat 6, that's plenum, okay? And that's going to be used to comply with fire codes in certain type of builds. Question 8. What is a major limitation of a point-to-point topology? So point-to-point actually does have a high cost sometimes. Like if I just go out and buy a broadband connection for my ISP, hey, I want a 2.5 gigabits per second uplink. I got fiber in the local area. That may cost me $100 to $160 just for a small office, maybe a little more depending if it's the business ISP rate because, we offer support, right? But if I want like a T1 line, like a dedicated circuit between spoke offices, I'll get less bandwidth and it might even cost me more. But what is a major limitation of a point-to-point? It's limited scalability, right? It's point-to-point. I mean, so it's as simple as topology that it can be. You can't build technically, right? You can't build a point-to-multipoint off a dedicated physical circuit like that. Now, obviously, we know VPN and PLS. We can build stuff like that. But just for the Network Plus, right? Point-to-point technically doesn't scale. Question 9. Which of the following transceiver form factors is designed for high-density, high-speed data transmission and supports data rates up to 40 gigabits per second and beyond? So it's not going to be our coax BNC connector. It's not going to be RJ11, which is what like old dial-up phones used to have, right? So now we have between SFP and quad SFP. Now we're talking 40 gigabits per second and beyond. We're going to go with quad SFP. So the quad small form factor pluggable SFP is a high-density, hot swappable transceiver designed for high-speed data rates up to 40 gigabits per second and beyond. You see this at the core in the data center, right, where we have those QSFPs. Question 10. Which IPv4 address is used for loopback testing on a local device? It's going to be 127.001. That's the loopback IP. So that's attached to our NIC, right? It's what we use for local testing. If I build a web application and I don't deploy it anywhere, I don't put it on an app, web app service plan, whatever the case may be. I just do local testing. It's going to be my local host or 127.0.0.1. Question 11. The time to live TTL field in an IP packet is primarily used for which purpose? So it's going to be C. It's going to be 255 is actually the TTL field, okay? So to specify the maximum number of hops a packet can take before being discarded. And it's decremented by 1 at each hop, right? So if I go from router 1, 2, and 3, that's router 1 to 2, that's 1 hop. So it's going to decrement by 1. Which of the following is a characteristic of infrastructure as a service? So we're going into our cloud service provider models here. So it's not going to be A, because of infrastructure as a service, our customer responsibility is to manage the operating system ourselves. We'll never, if we're renting from a CSP, we're never going to be responsible for the underlying hardware and hypervisor. It's not a platform for developing. If we do infrastructure as a service, we upload our own operating system, and then we develop on top of that. That's a thing that's possible, right? But it's between C and D for me. But obviously C is pass, right? That's more accurately describing platform as a service. So I'm going to go with D. Users can provision and manage virtual machines and storage resources. Question 13. In the context of SDN, software-defined networking, and SD-WAN, software-defined wide area networks, what does application aware mean? So remember, with our software-defined networks, one of the advantages of it is that we can kind of have built-in QoS. So what we mean by that is, with SD-WAN, specifically SD-WAN, if we have multiple ISPs, we have like a multi-point. So we have our router, like if we're doing Cisco SD-WAN, let's say we have like our CSR platform, and we have 2 ISP connections and then a 5G LTE connection, 3 outbound ISP connections. And we onboard that into our vManage, and we set up Cisco SD-WAN, right? Well, from our vManage dashboard, we can say, hey, that 5G LTE network, it's pretty fast. It's not our most reliable, though, because obviously it's RF, right? It's 5G, so we could have interference. Anything could happen. It's not as reliable as that MPLS connection we have with ISP1. So for that 5G, we're actually going to send non-critical applications through that 5G. And what we define non-critical obviously is up to the business unit, but maybe that's, okay, our Office 365, our Salesforce, things that conduct business will be over that MPLS connection because it's dedicated, right? We know it's going to stay up and have high reliability during working hours. So if users are going to Facebook, because we let them do that, or anything like their Google searches, random websites, YouTube, right? We're going to send that over the 5G so that video streaming that they may need, which may be for their job. They may need to watch something on YouTube to help with their job. But that's going to go over the 5G. We can do that easily in SD-WAN and SDN through whatever platform we're using for SDN or SD-WAN, okay? So what does application aware mean? So the network prioritizes traffic based on the type of application to ensure optimal performance. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 14. What is the primary benefit of zero-touch provisioning in SD-WAN environments? So it's going to be B, right? The automatic configuration of network devices, zero touch. Plug that network device into your wall jack. You have DHCP configured on there, the correct options, and then boom, it gets onboarded, right? It becomes part of that fabric. So B. Pause the video if you'd like to read that explanation. Question 15. Which of the following connectors is primarily used for telephone and low-speed data connections, such as DSL internet? So yeah, that old school DSL. That is going to be our RJ11, right? That's that old, it's like almost half the size of RJ45. So we're going to go with A, RJ11. You can pause and read the explanation if you'd like. Question 16. In which layer of the OSI model does the process of session management, including the establishment, maintenance, and termination of connections, occur? So OSI model, layers 1 through 7, right? And layer 1, just to go through it real quick, layer 1's physical, layer 2's data link, layer 3's network, layer 4 is our transport layer, layer 5 session layer, layer 6 is the presentation layer, and then at layer 7 is the application layer. Now, as network engineers, typically we focus like layer 1, layer 4, and this one always, when I first started out, tripped me up, because session management, including the establishment, I think TCP, right? And then that brings me to transport layer. But actually, this specifically is describing when it says session management, including the establishment, maintenance, and termination of connections. They actually occur in the session layer, okay? So we'll read our explanation as to why as well. So the session layer is responsible for managing session between applications. It controls the establishment, maintenance, and termination of communication session. This layer ensures that the data streams from both ends are properly synchronized, providing mechanisms for dialogue control and recovery in case of session interruption. So that's part of the entire stack, right? And that is a little bit of TCP, UDP leading into it, but we consider that the session layer, okay? Question 17. What is the primary purpose of subnetting in an IP network? Okay, I'm doing this all in one take, so I gotta drink some water for sure, or my voice will just be destroyed. Okay, so subnetting. Without diving into a 20-minute lecture on the history of like subnetting and IP addressing, classical, classless, it's just we take a big network, a /16, a /24, and we divide it into smaller ones to assign it to different business units, spoke sites, or for whatever our purpose is, right? And that helps us conserve as well. Conserve. So that's going to be A, to conserve IP addresses by dividing a larger network into smaller subnetworks. Question 18. Which protocol is used to automate the assignment of IP addresses in a network? So how do we dynamically assign IP addresses? You guys know it. It's Dynamic Host Control Protocol. We do this by the acronym DOOR, right? Discover, offer, request, acknowledge. Discover and request are from the client. Offer and acknowledge are from the server. DHCP is a service in an IPv4 network that allows us to do this. Question 19. In the three-tier hierarchical model, what is the primary role of the distribution layer? So it's not B. That's the access layer. Connects directly. So merges the core and access layer into one. Now it's between them, right? It's between them. A, provides high-speed connectivity between core layer devices. So core devices will be interconnected to each other as well. So what I'm thinking is for the campus, right? That's what a three-tier hierarchical model is also for the campus. For our users, typically are the routing, the policy-based networking at the campus, that fabric happens at the distribution layer. So I'm leaning towards D here. So let's see if we're correct. And yes, we are. So you can pause the video, read that explanation if you'd like. Question 20. Which of the following IEEE standards is specifically designed to operate exclusively in the 5 gigahertz frequency band and offers speed up to several gigabits per second? So this is getting into the different Wi-Fi standards, right? Sometimes you hear this as Wi-Fi 4, Wi-Fi 5, Wi-Fi 6, and now Wi-Fi 7. But there will be 802.11 IEEE standard along with it. So for just 5 gigahertz, that is going to be D, 802.11 AC. That's the standard for, right? Sometimes known as Wi-Fi 5 as well, where then Wi-Fi 6 would be 802.11 AX, but this is exclusively in the 5 gigahertz range. Question 21. Which of these is a feature of IPv6 addressing that allows devices to automatically configure an IP address? So this is not the IPv6 version of DHCP, because we have DHCP v6. This is just something that comes with IPv6, something that is innate to IPv6. It's called SLAC, which is the stateless address auto configuration, and it allows IPv6 enabled devices to self-assign, right, without the need for a DHCP server. So this it replaces DHCP, but doesn't get rid of it in IPv6. I hope that makes sense. It's just another way to auto-assign IPv6 in a network, but IPv6 still has DHCP version 6, right? Because sometimes network engineers, we're used to that. We're used to troubleshooting DHCP rather than relying on something we may not be used to, which is SLAC in IPv6 networks. Question 22. What is the main purpose of a load balancer in a network? So D, this one's kind of easy. Sometimes these questions, like the answers are like give me's. To distribute incoming network traffic across multiple servers. That's what load balancing does. Even if it's in the cloud, if it's on-prem, that's what a load balancer does. It distributes the load of incoming traffic, right, to our web server farm, to whatever kind of cluster we may have, right? Pause the video if you'd like to read that explanation. Question 23. What is configuration drift, and how does infrastructure as code, IAC, help prevent it? So configuration drift. Imagine we're in a NOC and we're expanding, right? We're expanding like crazy. So we're setting up so many spoke sites. And so we hire some junior network admins and network engineer, and we're the senior. And we say, hey, here in our configuration, our knowledge management base, which you should be using Git, right? But let's just say you're not. Here's a Word document, because I'm an old school senior network engineer and I've just been working on this network for 15 years, that you need to use for all these switches. Well, we have the new Catalyst 9300. That's the Catalyst 3800 configuration in that old school Word document. Well, now we have these new junior network admins, our field guys, baselining these switches, and they're all doing it a little different. And they go out to the field, deploy it, and then as we begin to start to have some sort of source control management, infrastructure as code, we notice that there's a little bit different configuration on all these switches, which can also complicate troubleshooting because you may be used to what you would agree is a standard, and then you SSH to a spoke site, and it's not the standard. So that's what configuration drift is. Slowly getting away from what should be our golden baseline, right? So back to the question, what is the answer here? So it is going to be B. Configuration drift refers to divergence of infrastructure from its intended state. Infrastructure as code helps prevent it by automating compliance with predefined configurations. There's the explanation. You can pause and check it out. Question 24. Which of the following features is commonly associated with a network switch? So network switch, right, segments networks at layer 2 by inserting that VLAN header, that 4x IEEE 802.1q standard. That's going to be C, VLAN support. We configure VLANs at switches. Question 25. Which of the following IPSec components is responsible for providing data encryption? So IPSec has stages, right? If we do an internet key exchange v1, v2, we're going to have those stages of how we encrypt and how we do like non-repudiation and things like that, okay? So what actually does the data encryption? What actually is going to encrypt the payload to make sure our data is confidential when it's crossing an untrusted public network? That is going to be D, the encapsulating security payload. And you may have to let this in on a firewall too, and it's got its own port number. But yeah, TLS is not part of IPSec. That's transport layer security. That's SSL, different, PKI. Not getting into that. Internet key exchange, that is a part of IPSec. That is a part of the internet key exchange, right? Sending the asymmetric encryption keys to be able to encrypt, decrypt. Then the authentication header, AH, is also part of IPSec, but that's not providing confidentiality. That's not providing data encryption. So our answer is D, ESP, the encapsulating security payload. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 26. Which of the following cloud deployment models allows an organization to leverage both public and private cloud resources while maintaining data and application in separate environments? Okay, so we have the 4 deployment models up here to leverage both public and private cloud. So it's just hybrid, right? That one's easy once it's a long question, but hybrid just describes any one of these 3, public, private, or community, being combined with each other, right? So that's a hybrid cloud solution. Pause the video if you'd like to read that explanation. Question 27. Which layer of the OSI model is responsible for path selection and logical addressing? That's going to be network. So the network layer, always think routers or routing. So path selection, that's where we will send it. What will be our next hop? Routers decide that. That's at the network layer based off your IPv4, IPv6 address. And it also gives devices their logical addressing within the interconnected network, the internet, right? Or your enterprise, or whatever the case may be. Pause the video if you'd like to read that explanation. Question 28. Which protocol is essential for synchronizing clocks across devices on a network and operates on port UDP 123? I didn't put that in there, but it's UDP. That's the network timing protocol that synchronizes timing in an enterprise. Question 29. Which protocol is used for transferring files without the need for authentication and operates on port 69? The untrusted little brother of FTP. Maybe older brother. TFTP probably came first, but that is TFTP, okay? That operates on port 69, and it does not have that authentication. When you use FTP, you gotta sign in with like username, password, and it doesn't have those two ports controller data. It's just send. There is some things built into the TFTP application that ensures that TFTP messages are received, right? But it's not going to provide authentication or anything advanced like that. So that's TFTP. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 30. What is the main advantage of using small form factor pluggable transceivers in a network? So I'm looking at A and D because they don't provide wireless connectivity. That's not what they are in SFP. They're like never used in residential networks. I've never seen it. So between A and D, right? So they do support single mode fiber. They support multi-mode fiber. They support copper too. You could have an SFP that just does RJ45 connections. You have SFPs that do twin ax or direct attached cables. So the more correct answer here is A. They are hot swappable and allow for easy upgrades without powering down equipment. That is an advantage of an SFP. I'll pause the video if you'd like to read that explanation. Question 31. What is the main advantage of using version control in the context of infrastructure as code? So, software development, infrastructure as code it's automation. Yes, maybe there's a software development, to it, like a DevOps engineer would maintain and do infrastructure as code. Doesn't encrypt. I got duplicate answers here, so I'll probably have to go fix that. But the answer we're looking for here is D. It helps in keeping track of changes and rolling back problematic updates. I will fix this for any of our customers here because A would have got it wrong, but it's the same answer. So I got to go make a little change, but it is D. It helps in keeping track of changes and rolling back problematic updates. Pause the video if you'd like to read that explanation. Question 32. Which OSI layer is responsible for ensuring data is formatted correctly for the receiving application? So the formatting, right? How do we make sure it's formatted for that application? That's going to be the presentation layer, okay? Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 33. Which cloud service allows an organization to establish a private, high bandwidth connection between its on-premises data center and a cloud service provider bypassing the public internet? So let's read this. Private, high bandwidth connection between its data center and cloud service provider bypassing the public internet. So what we're looking at here is it's not going through the ISP connection, right? So this is something really unique. I have never seen this in practice or be used before, and just because I haven't done a lot of cloud engineering for big enterprises. But it's called Direct Connect, okay? Not a VPN, because the VPN rides over your ISP, right? So it's going to be called a Direct Connect. So pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. But the reason it's not A, B, or D is because those all ride over the ISP, like through the internet, right? Question 34. Which protocol suite is widely used in VPNs to secure data transmission and includes components like AH, ESP, and IKE, which is authentication header, encapsulating security payload, and the internet key exchange? That's our best friend, IPSec, right? IPSec, that's the three main components in that VPN configuration and protecting your data in transit. Question 35. What is the primary function of the ICMP protocol? Well, the best answer here is going to be C, right? That's ping, error reporting, diagnostics. It's used in troubleshooting, right? Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 36. Which protocol is used to retrieve email from a mail server to a local client? So we're obviously going to get rid of C and D. Now it's between SMTP and IMAP, both protocols used in email, right? In the exchange of email, okay? And they have their own purpose. But in this case, when we're retrieving mail from a mail server to a local client, so that's like local client reaching out to the mail server, whatever it is, and pulling down the email that was sent to them, that's IMAP, okay? That's going to be IMAP. So the Internet Message Access Protocol is used to retrieve emails from a mail server, allowing users to access and manage their messages on a local client. Question 37. If you were troubleshooting a problem where devices on the same local network could not communicate with each other, which OSI layer would you likely begin with? Local network. So if you need to B or C, right? It's a local network. What they're trying to say here is that the LAN, you're dealing with switching. But obviously, communication via layer 3 does happen if we have inter-VLAN communication. But I think the more accurate one here is going to be B, the data link layer. Actually, no, I'm actually going to go with D here. Because network troubleshooting, right? You start at the lowest level. This one, you'd want to start bottom to top. So actually, if there's a problem in the local network, and I think when they say local network here, actually, I think I'm trying, like literally, I'm here, right? I'm talking to the user. I'm at the computer's I'm at the user's desk. I'm going to go physical layer, right? So yes, on the same local network, it could be layer 1, 2, or 3, but you start there. Is it plugged in? Is the cable crimped correctly? You know, you always start at layer 1 because if you don't, you might troubleshoot yourself into a web. And it's like, oh, dang, it was the cable, right? Question 38. Which of the following ports is used by DHCP to assign IP addresses to devices on a network? So that's going to be port 67 and 68. 67 for the server to listen to client requests, and port 68 for the client to receive responses. So two port numbers used in DHCP. Question 39. Which of the following describes a network topology where every device is connected to every other device? So we're going to go with mesh here. That's going to be a mesh, okay? The most redundant and the most complex to configure, but that is a mesh. Question 40. Which protocol is used for remote desktop access and typically operates on port 3389? Definitely let this in on the firewall, guys. Just kidding, but RDP, right? It kind of gives it away. RDP is the remote desktop protocol, and it operates over port 3389. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 41. This one, a little error here. It's a duplicate. It doubled my answers here. But that's okay. We'll go over it. We make our software custom, so it happens. Which protocol uses port 514 and is commonly used for collecting and storing log messages from network devices? That is going to be syslog. So D, syslog. Syslog's used, like if you're a network admin working on Cisco devices, that's what I'm used to. You know, syslog messages appear all the time in the CLI, but you can put those to a centralized server, and that's syslog. Question 42. Which layer of the OSI model is responsible for determining the path that data will take from the source to the destination across multiple networks? So it's obviously going to be C or D here, right? Routing or the transport layer. But obviously more accurately, it's talking about routing, right? Which is the network layer. So that's going to be C, the network layer. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 43. Which of the following allows multiple devices on a local network to share a single public IP address? So that's the network address translation, right? We commonly use it for PAT, port address translation, which is just part of the NAT technologies, right? But you get a single public IP, and using NAT or PAT, you can actually translate a whole /24, whole /20 private IP addresses to get you to communicate onto the internet. Which is what, if you're at your house right now, you can type in what is my public IP. It'll be different than what your computer has, right? Because NAT is enabled. Question 44. Which of the following best describes software-defined networking? So SDN, right? Versus traditional networking. This is controller-based networking. Let's check it out. So it's going to be C, right? A networking model that uses software-based controllers to manage and automate network traffic and get you that centralized view, right? It's not a traditional networking model. We're going to go with C. Pause the video if you'd like to read that explanation. Question 45. What type of address is used to identify devices on the same local network? So obviously we have two things that make sense here. The IP address and the MAC address. Both are addresses that define an individual user. Now the MAC address gets stripped at every broadcast domain, meaning that if I'm a user on the 192.168.0.0 network and I talk to the Google DNS server, that Google DNS server will never see my computer's MAC address because at each Ethernet segment, my layer 2 header gets stripped. So it says what type of address is used to identify devices on the same local network. I'm thinking within the same VLAN, the same broadcast domain. I'm going to go with MAC address. Let's see what the answer is. And yep, that is the MAC address. The 48-bit, 12 hexadecimal digit burned in address that makes every device unique on your local network. Question 46. What is the main purpose of VXLAN, Virtual Extensible Local Area Network, in data center environments? So it's going to be D, to address scalability issues associated with traditional VLANs by extending layer 2 networks over layer 3 networks. So VXLAN, very complicated. Well, for someone in the Network Plus exam, if you're junior, probably not going to be configuring this on the exam anytime soon, but this lets you expand your data centers, right? This allows you to have two ESXi clusters geographically dispersed, and using a tunneling protocol, VTEP, VXLAN, allows you to have the same local area networks on both those geographically dispersed data centers on the same subnet, on the same VLAN. It gets transported over that tunnel configuration and gives you now ability to do things like vMotion over that VXLAN connection. It's awesome, right? It allows you to scale your data centers. Right? Moving on. Question 47. Which of the following is a key characteristic of software-defined wide area networks? So it's going to be A. It is transport agnostic. Transport network being the demarcation point beyond what is not yours anymore. Transport network is anything beyond the router that you own, right? So it's your ISP. With SD-WAN as transport agnostic, we could have multi-home, triple-home connections. I just made that one up, triple home. Don't use that in actual. But you can have a single router there at your spoke, at your office that has an MPLS, an LTE, a fiber broadband connection. All three ISPs and SD-WAN will look at those and say, okay, we can use any three of these paths, right? So that's what SD-WAN does. So A is our answer. Pause the video if you'd like to read that explanation. Question 48. What is the primary difference between single-mode fiber and multi-mode fiber? So I'm going to go with B here, because C and D don't make sense. It's not susceptible to interference. It's light, right? So it doesn't, it's not susceptible to EMI. Multi-mode does not support higher data rates. So it's going to be B. Single-mode fiber does have that smaller core diameter and a single light for long-distance transmission, while multi-mode has a little bit larger core, 50 to 60, is it 62.5 microns? I'll have to edit that in for multi-mode, and it, has multiple streams of light in your data center, things like that. Pause the video if you'd like to read that explanation. Question 49. The server message block protocol, which allows for file and printer sharing, typically operates on which port? So SMB, that's going to be port 445, very vulnerable, so, caution here. But yeah, that's the server message block protocol. Pause the video if you'd like to read that explanation. And question 50, this is going to be our last question. I'm going to stop the video, and then I'll make a part 2 to this to finish all the 100 questions, so stay tuned. But question 50, which of the following cables is most commonly used for broadband internet and cable television due to its superior shielding and ability to transmit high-frequency signals over long distances? So all A, B, and C can be used for this, but we're going to go with B here, RG6. So RG6 coax cable is commonly used for broadband internet and cable television. It has a thicker conductor and better shielding than older RJ59 cables, allowing for higher frequency signals and longer transmission distances. All right, awesome. So I'm going to stop the video now, and I'll finish this in a part 2. We'll do all 50 questions. Hopefully you stay tuned to the end, especially if you're studying for the Network Plus exam. Hit the link in the description below if you want access to these questions. It's only $69 for lifetime access. I want to thank everyone for viewing. Like, subscribe, share with your friends. Stay tuned for part 2.